The Smokin Gavel podcast is now in session. I'm retired Judge Chip Small, who will preside over this podcast along with my bailiff, Madeline Rose. We welcome you and ask you to join us as we take a look at our justice system from a unique, candid, and inside view. Maddie, what's on the docket today?
Well, hello, Your Honor. Today we'll discuss just how hot your smoking gavel was when you were on the bench. Then you'll share a couple background stories about what happened before you began writing True Justice. And lastly, we'll begin to read the beginning of True Justice, a novel based upon the actual true crimes you shared with us earlier. So, Judge, just how hot was your gavel during your time on the bench? I'll bet it was pretty hot with all those cases.
Well, you'd be surprised. I honestly only remember using my gavel once in 27 years. It was a trial up in Waterville, and it was the one and only time they had scheduled a one-day jury trial in a criminal case. Normally, criminal cases would take at least 2 days to try, many times longer than that. But usually you'd pick a jury in the morning, you'd put the evidence on in the afternoon, and then finish up the evidence the following day, and then have closing arguments and jury deliberations. And that'd be a 2-day affair. But in this particular case, they'd scheduled it for one day because the evidence wasn't going to take very long. So we picked the jury in the morning, and in the afternoon, they started doing their opening statements and started doing testimony. Well, my job as a trial judge, other than being a NAT, was to pay attention to what the questions were to make sure I could respond instantly to any objections, and pay attention to the jury to make sure they're paying attention. Well, this one particular day, I was half listening to the opening statements and watching the jury, and then they called the state called the first witness and testifying, and I glance over and it looks like juror 11 is asleep. And I'm going, no. So I kind of rustle some papers and stuff on the bench because my seat wasn't very far from juror 11, and nothing. It looks like he's asleep. It's not just his eyes are closed.
Here comes the gnat to annoy someone asleep.
Exactly. So finally I thought, I got to make sure he's asleep or not. So I grabbed my gavel and bam, and everybody but not juror 11. He was still sound asleep.
Are you serious?
And then I said, we'll take a recess. No one knew what was going on except me. And so everybody stood up, all the jurors stood up to leave for the recess, but not juror 11.
So they just think that you randomly slammed your gavel, though.
Yeah.
So
they were just
so
kind
you're
of, what's
making
going
yourself
on?
look crazy.
Yeah, they're going, what's going on? And so juror 10, I think, elbowed juror 11, woke him up, and they left. So I brought the lawyers into my chambers and told them what was going on because no one knew. And I explained, and because it was only planned to be a one-day trial, we didn't pick an alternate juror. So there were only 12 jurors.
Oh, yeah.
And this one had missed all the opening statements and part of the testimony. And I said, we don't have an alternate, so would both sides agree to just have 11 jurors try the case? Because the parties can agree to do that if they want. And they looked at me and said, no, but we'll agree to a bench trial, Judge, which meant we dismiss the jury and I'd have to decide the case, which was fine, but I had to confess to him, I really wasn't paying attention to the evidence. I'm just listening to the questions and watching the jurors. So you're going to have to start over again. And they said, okay, we will. So I ended up getting stuck having to decide that case. But that's the only time I remember actually using my gavel.
Well, it sounds like you didn't have a complete jury. And, the whole point is to have a jury try a case. And if the jury is not adequate, then here comes the gnat.
Yep.
The judge. Wow. So can you share with us a couple true life incidences that happened to you before you even began writing True Justice?
Sure. It's amazing what happens when you're writing a novel, at least what happens to me, both Stark Justice and True Justice. And True Justice, when I write my novels, I do a lot of research. And most of it is person to person. I try to interview people that know about the subject I'm writing about. So when I write about it in my book, I call them authentic lies. I write about things, but if the person is aware of the particular area or subject area that I'm writing about, they'll go, "Whoa, he knows what he's talking
Factual
about."
based. Yeah.
And so anyway, so one day, while I was still outlining True Justice, and I'd already decided, okay, we're going to do Officer Gallegos as inspiration and Patrick as inspiration on the other, but I'm writing the outline, and my wife and I are going to church one Sunday, and as we get to a roundabout near our house, the engine blows up in her truck. She had, I won't mention the brand, they might get upset. But anyway, she pulls over her pickup, and fortunately for me, 2 cars behind us was a deputy sheriff, a sergeant that happened to know me. So he pulls up and asks, can I help you, Judge? And I said, well, yeah, my wife's engine just blew up. She's calling a tow, but we only live a few blocks away. Could you give me a ride back to my house? I'll get my car and I'll pick her up and we can still make it to church on time. So he goes, sure. So he said, as long as you don't mind sitting in the back of my rig. And I said, oh, no, that's perfect. I need to experience what it's like to be in the back of your rig, because I'm writing this book and I tell them about Gallegos, I tell them about and Patrick's killing and all this stuff. Get to my house, get in my car, go pick up my wife, and as we're driving to church, we're still not there yet, my phone rings, and it's a detective I know, and he goes, Chip, I just heard you're writing about this and this one, and I was in on the arrest on this one, and my dad was in on the arrest on that one. So boom, I got 2 interviews already before I finished my outline. So that's one of the things that happened while I was writing True Justice.
Well, you were thorough, so that's all that matters.
Well, it was very fortuitous. So the Smokin Gavel podcast is sponsored by Judge Small Books and Gatekeeper Press, a full-service publishing company empowering authors with complete creative control, professional guidance, and 100% royalties. Whether you're publishing your first book or your 10th, their team makes the process simple, transparent, and truly author-friendly. And I can attest to that. It was really fun working with them, and I look forward to working with them in the future. So listeners of the show can receive 10% off of any publishing package with Gatekeeper Press. Just mention code CHIPSMALL when requesting a quote or during your free consultation at Gatekeeper Press. That's gatekeeperpress.com.
Okay, one of my favorite stories that you've told me is the tamale story. How about you share that one with everybody? What's some of your investigatory work?
I'll be glad to. So I finished the outline on True Justice, and I believe I finished it in late December, early January. But I couldn't start because I had, for whatever reason, decided that the opening scene had to be the sister of the officer that ends up being slain, Homer Hernandez, making tamales with the mother of the gang member who kills the sister's brother. It had to start that way. And the problem was I didn't know how to make tamales.
A lot of us don't.
So I searched for weeks. I kept trying to find somebody that knew how to make tamales. And I couldn't.
That's an art.
Well, I found that out.
Yeah.
So eventually, I'm just sitting at home, and I get a call from a friend of mine, and he tells me how Catalina and her son need a ride, and could I give him a ride? And I'd never met her, but sure, I can give him a ride. So I pick them up, and they live in an area which it was 100% Hispanic, and I'm thinking, man, she might know how to make tamales. So we're driving where she needs the ride. I start telling her about my books. And finally, before we get to our destination, I look at her and go, is there any chance you know how to make tamales? Well, it turns out she was the queen of tamale makers. She made them, hundreds of them, and she did it for fundraisers, which is what I had my characters doing in my outline.
Right. That's a typical thing. I've had a lot of fundraiser tamales, and those are always the best.
Oh, they are. Especially if
homemade.
Catalina makes them.
Oh, yeah. Way better than store-bought. It's a sin to buy store-bought. If you live in Wenatchee, Washington, and you're buying store-bought tamales, something is wrong with you.
Yeah. So that Sunday, I'm learning how to make tamales, and she was good at it and very meticulous. You had to shred that chicken just the right way. You had to rinse those husks one by one. it was a lot of work. They were delicious tamales, but I did learn that you're better off buying tamales than making them because it's so much work.
Well, you buy them from a donated area, or you just know
Absolutely.
somebody.
You
Restaurants
buy them
too.
at a church fundraiser.
Yes.
Fresh
yes.
made.
Yes. Well, listeners, it's time for you to hear the beginning of True Justice.
True Justice, a novel written by T.W. Small, narrated by the author and Madeline Rose. No matter where people go, sooner or later, there's the law. And sooner or later, they find that God's already been there. John Chisholm, played by John Wayne in the movie Chisholm. Part 1, Prologue. The distinctive aromas of chicken and serrano peppers permeate the air. The two women are busily preparing dozens of tamales in Maria's kitchen for their church's upcoming fundraiser. Maria Azul stands at the counter, pouring the masa into a large pan, while Valeria carefully rinses each corn husk. Speaking in Spanish, Valeria asks what first brought the Azul family to Eagleton. Maria shares,
We moved here from East LA to get our son Arturo away from the gangs, but after a few months we discovered Eagleton has a gang problem too.
She laments.
I'm afraid Arturo is getting caught up in it.
Stepping over to the stove, Valeria observes that the peppers simmering in the hot water are plump. She turns off the heat and asks,
What makes you think that? The clothes he's wearing, and I suspect he has started drinking. Those are telltale signs, I'm afraid.
Valeria comments as she empties a large can of crushed green tomatoes into the blender on the counter.
He's a good boy. Arturo is the one who asked us to move from LA. He confided that he was just pressured to join a gang there.
She continues,
Arturo's not a fighter. He's a soccer player. That's what he dreams about. At least that's what he used to tell us. All he ever did was play soccer up until a little while ago.
After sprinkling the baking powder and a dash of cumin on the masa, Maria then pours a generous amount of salt onto the mixture, making a white cross, and quietly says a prayer.
But not anymore?
Valeria asks. Maria shakes her head.
I don't know what to do.
Her quiet cry is drowned out by the sound of the blender Valeria uses to mix the onions, tomatoes, and peppers. After turning off the blender, Valeria asks,
Do you know my brother Homer is a deputy sheriff? He works with lots of kids who are struggling. I wonder if he knows Arturo. I hope not.
Maria states sternly.
No, I don't mean Arturo has done something bad. I mean Homer often goes to the youth center to help and counsel teens. Perhaps he has seen Arturo there.
After Maria adds a considerable amount of oil to the masa mixture, she begins to knead it until it is sticky enough to make small balls. Valeria carefully shreds the chicken. The two continue working in silence as they get ready to make the tamales. Maria quietly prays that maybe, just maybe, Homer can help influence Arturo. Listeners, notice the prologue sets the table, if you will, pun intended, for the rest of the book. The reader is introduced to some of the characters. Maria Azul, mother of Arturo. You learn she is hardworking, generous, concerned about her son, and a Christian. Arturo is a young man, an athlete, who appears to have reluctantly become a gang member. Valeria is the sister of Officer Homer Hernandez. Valeria is also caring, generous, and proud of her brother, and a Christian as well. Finally, Homer Hernandez, a law enforcement officer who cares enough to volunteer to help counsel teenagers. In Chapter 1, the reader will be introduced to more of the characters. In our next episode, we'll continue reading True Justice, but before that, Judge Small will share his thoughts on the death penalty. Thanks for listening today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Smokin Gavel podcast. To learn more, visit JudgeSmallBooks.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to stay connected. Until next time, God bless.